Hi everyone, my name is Kali S. I am a knitter that loves to bring color into your life, and I've been knitting for a long time. I will tell you more about it, but now in modern time it looks like the older experience is worthless, and I tend to disagree, and I also begrudge all the people that say that vintage patterns are useless, or what designers did wrong earlier. So I'm going to tell you why I think it's not true, and what I think the advantages of vintage pattern making was, or still is. There still are some around. So first let me start with what I'm wearing. I am wearing a ranunculus. I don't think I need to say very much about it. Maybe you might be surprised because you don't see all the yoke patterns that you usually see, but this is based on the wool that I chose for this garment. It's a very lengthy, hairy wool, and honestly, I could have done just stockinette and it would have been the same. You wouldn't see much difference. You see some holes here due to the pattern that the ranunculus has. I enjoyed it very much. Am I a big ranunculus fan? I don't know, to be honest, but I love this one. It's a great garment. I made some adjustments around the body because I don't like this loose fitting garments, but other than that I'm fine. I'm very neutral compared to so many people. So let me tell you a little bit about my knitting journey. I learned to knit when I think my first garment, if I find it, I'll put a picture up here. My earliest garment I knitted when I was 8, 9, 10 or something, if I recall properly. And of course in Germany or in Switzerland where I was living, I went to school and we had knitting classes where we learned to stitch and knit and crochet and whatever. So I learned to knit, and I always loved it. My grandmother was an avid knitter. My mother also used to knit lovely things. And then I don't know, I became a mother, I think, and I think that's the last time I knitted. And this year I came back to knitting, and it has been like, great. But I have discovered many things that are different, and that's why I came with the idea of this video. And it's going to be a little bit of a rant, but you know, don't take it too seriously. I'm also going to do a second video, I think, where I speak about the advantages of modern knitting, because I think there are some good things, but not everything is bad about the way we used to knit. And because I think I haven't knitted for 25 years or something. You know, I noticed the differences, and I just wanted to tell you about them and try to break some, you know, make sure that vintage knitting isn't completely forgotten and frowned upon in the knitting world. So that's what I want to tell you about. And you know, those are generalization. It's meant to be entertaining. Don't take it, you know, don't come at me and go, oh, but you're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, you know, but this is why we're having the discussion. So I think one of the key things that I discovered when I came back was we all have to knit top down. That's the only right way to knit. And until then, I always knitted bottom up in pieces. That's how I learned to knit. And I remember wearing one round yoke jumper, and it didn't fit me at all. And I didn't like it, and this was nothing for me. Things have changed, you know, we have short rows, and you would add raglan increases and stuff like that. So we have become much better with the round yoke jumpers. But I learned to knit bottom up, in pieces. And I think there are many advantages. So what we hear is you cannot measure and make sure that it has the right fit. What did knitters do for the last 200, 300 years, or how many years we have been knitting? Of course, you would put it on your body, you would take another jumper or another garment that would be similar and you would put it on top and it would give you a good idea. But of course, if you didn't block it, you would have the same issue independently, whether you can put them on top of your neck or not. You wouldn't know whether you have the right size. So what I'm trying to say is this is what people have been doing before, and somehow they all got garments that would fit them. And even now, you know, most of my garments lately I have been knitting top down, and still some I had to reopen and redo because they were too long and they were not fitting, etc. So fitting garments is not a new thing. We always had them. At least that's how I recall it. We were able to check and see whether we can wear them. So I think that's something that people are holding against vintage patterns, but it's not true. I also think that actually for a beginner, I think knitting in pieces would be easier. And let me explain why. So I know everyone says, oh, you have to start top down. It's so much harder to do bottom up, but it's not true. I don't think it's true. So for me, there are different reasons. Because when you start at the bottom, you usually start with the easier part. You know, you have the ribbing. Okay, maybe you say that's a little bit difficult, but you have to learn to purl and to knit. So you start with the ribbing and then you do stockinette. No increases, no decreases, or very few increases if. So you start with the easiest part. So for me, when you start and you're not proficient, starting with the easier part is best. So bottom up is great. So that's for me one thing. And if you make, so the mistakes start usually in the yoke, in the more difficult part, or if you have a color work, in the more difficult part. So when you start top down and you have a mistake here, which I had in one of my last garments, and I was already at the bottom, I had to frock so much. The other way around, if you start bottom up, you knit stockinette. Hopefully you don't do too many mistakes. And then if you start making mistakes here in your yoke, you don't have that much to undo. So I think that's also a big advantage, not only for beginner knitters, but for anyone. So I think that it's really worthwhile to start bottom up, especially if you start a beginner. Also, I don't know, I mean, right now I've been knitting only in one pieces. Even garments that were in pieces originally, I rewrote to make them go in one pieces. And while I understand, I really hate this long pieces of in the rounds where you knit and knit and knit and knit. And I think if you're a beginner, that's very frustrating. I remember even when I was a beginner doing it in pieces, so you have the front, the back, each sleeve, you know, that would take time, and I was always happy when I got at the end of one part. So for me, if you're a beginner, that's definitely something I would start with. Sorry, I'm always looking on my iPad because this is where I took my notes, not to forget everything. I also think that when you start in pieces, you learn about garment making. I think that's quite crucial. I mean, I think most of us are making changes to the patterns. Maybe when you are a very early beginner, but even if you're a beginner, you know, you make your sleeve longer, you don't like the way it looks at the top, so you make changes. And I think it's so much easier when it's in piece because it's flat. So it's very easy. It's usually when you knit flat bottom up, you knit up and then you start with the decreases. And decreases are usually so much easier than increases. They're less apparent also than increases, because increases, you know, you have to see, you have to see, and you might make holes, and so it's much nicer to do it top down, bottom up. And you learn about pieces, you learn about what you can change and what you need to do, more decreases, less decreases. I think that now, because it's more complex, it's also much harder to really adapt it. You have to become far more proficient to be able to make changes to your garment. I think it was easier. It is easier when you knit in pieces. And yes, of course, you could say, well, you have to knit and purl because you're not just knitting in the round. But I think you need to learn to purl. It's, those are the two main stitches in knitting. And the earlier you start, so the more you do purling, the better you become. And then I personally don't mind purling at all. I knit also Eastern style, so it's much easier. But for me, it's just part of it, and it's just a way of knitting, a different way. So I don't think it's easier to knit top down. I think it's easier to knit in pieces, bottom up. That's my personal opinion. Then I also think one of the main reasons to do it in pieces, and I already spoke about this earlier, is it gives you a faster sense of achievement. Because when you do it in one piece, you really have to finish every part. And of course, once you're able to come to separate body and sleeves, that's a sense of achievement. But it takes time and time and time. And I think it's so much better to be able to, you do the front, and then, you've done the front. You do the back, you've done the back. And then the sleeves are much faster. You can even knit them in parallel, which I think is the main advantage. While when you have them on your, in the round, it's so much more difficult. You would have to stop after, each round and then go to the next sleeves, and then you may have to make sure you don't mix it up. So you never do that. You always do one sleeve first and then the second one. While when you knit in pieces, you can do both sleeves at the same time, and then you're sure that they are exactly the same. I find that sometimes disturbing that, I know that here I have knitted one round more on the right hand than on the left hand sleeve. So I think that's something I don't like. And something that I also don't like is how heavy it gets. So I usually try to do the sleeves first before I do the body, because knitting sleeves, there are small circumferences, you do it in the round, and yes, it goes faster, but you have to turn the whole body when you do it in one piece. I really hate that. You don't have that issue when you knit in pieces, because it's not so heavy, you can turn it easily, it's so much easier to work with. So for me, also another reason to do this as a beginner. When you're more experienced, maybe there are tricks around the heaviness of the garment, but still, it's not ideal, I think. So for me, top down is great. I do it now all the time, but I think for a beginner, that's not the best thing to do. If you're beginning, maybe you should start in pieces and top down, bottom up, and then you learn a lot and it's much easier. The second thing is these patterns. I know some, I see it on Instagram or on YouTube, young knitters going, I just did a vintage pattern and it has like only a quarter of a page, and oh my god, how can I do this? And I go, I wish the patterns wouldn't be as long. Maybe a quarter of a page is a little bit not enough, but I hate this 18 pages. Because I feel there's so much fluff. Of course, if it's a color work or, something quite intricate and difficult to knit, then you would need diagrams and you might have to explain some of the stitches. But in general, I bought a pattern for a stockinette t-shirt or something, and I think it had 13 pages, 14 pages. And sometimes it's just stating obvious things. So I understand when you are a beginner, maybe that's easier, but I've made mistakes because I don't read the pattern correctly, or not correctly, but I don't take the time to read every sentence because I know, but then obviously I didn't know because I make mistakes. And I find that quite annoying because I know how to do patterns, I know how to adapt patterns, knitting patterns based on my size. But when details are hidden in lots of fluff, I don't think that's very helpful. So ideally, you would have a very short description for people that are experienced, and then you have more information for people who want it. I love videos. I think videos is really what helps everyone because it gives the details. But that's me, you know, everyone is different, and maybe you think I'm stupid because you love 18 pages. I personally think, and I've worked in communication, sometimes less is more. More is not always better. So I find that sometimes there is just too much being said, which nobody needs. Yeah, so that's my second point that I don't like about modern knitting. And the third point is everything has at least 2 to 3 strands, and it makes everything more expensive. So add a strand of mohair there, and add, you know, so I've seen one pattern with 3 strands or even 4 strands, and I go, why? Because if you take mohair, there are different sizes mohairs, for example, or then take a different yarn. I don't get it because it very often makes the pattern more expensive, and I don't think that's what we need. Maybe I'm alone with that. So I have been using mohair strands as an added yarn. I get it, it adds fluff, but yeah, it increases the prices and the cost of your jumper. And if you think about how much time you invest and how much money you're already spending on the core yarn, I don't like that. And I think that if you have more than one yarn, it means that you have to think more. I mean, if you're replacing the proposed yarns and you don't find the yarns that they're offering, it makes it more difficult to swap, because maybe your mohair is a little bit thicker than the mohair they're using. So it means you have to find another yarn that is the main yarn that is then thicker. I think it makes it more difficult, more expensive, and that's something I don't like about modern knitting. So these are the 3 things that, yeah, I wanted to rant about. I don't know, maybe I'm alone, maybe you think I'm stupid. If you're younger and you like it the way it is today, please let me know. And the other way around, if you have been learning to knit as I did, and you think, yeah, there are great things about vintage knitting, then let me know as well. So whatever, let's discuss. And as I said, there will be another one where I tell you what I like about modern knitting. So if you like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and comment, of course, as always. Take care, bye bye, see you next time.